Neil from Essex here to talk to you this morning a little bit about the state of the equipment business. Those of you that are connected to our industry or maybe shopping for a piece of equipment can have wildly different experiences right now depending on the piece of equipment that you're looking for. So we're going to take a little bit of time today, walk around the dealership, show you some of the areas that we've got some inventory, where we're seeing some finance rate changes, cost increases. It's a wild and challenging time to be in business right now. So come along with me here today. Hopefully you'll find some of this interesting.
Essex, a helping hand with your land.
When it comes to equipment availability, you cannot paint with a broad brush across the entire industry and say that things are bad. There's areas where availability has been improving and things are starting to kind of get back to normal again. There's also areas where that's not happening. And if we go through and we kind of look for the driving force of what causes poor availability in a particular segment, one of those things would be a reliance upon imported commodity parts. Think things like belts and blades and bearings and spindles. If companies are going and sourcing a lot of those common parts from inexpensive overseas manufacturers, there's a very high likelihood that they're struggling to build equipment. The place that you see that most commonly done is in consumer equipment, that really cost-effective, cheap equipment that's out there, and those companies are sourcing a lot of those parts from overseas in order to be able to sell things at the best prices possible. So when you look at things like lawnmowers and inexpensive residential zero-turn mowers, really zero-turn mowers as a whole, there's a lot of that done, right? A lot of commodity parts used in this kind of equipment, and so companies have really been struggling to get things built. Going to Home Depot, I was there the other day, and I don't think they had a single lawn tractor sitting in the place, right? And that's been the case for months now. The availability for that kind of stuff is absolutely terrible. Our deliveries into our dealership are down as much as 70 to 80% from what they normally would be. We're seeing many of these manufacturers go and trim down their product lines. They go through and they reduce the specialty models or the ones that aren't sold in high volume so that their staff can focus on getting parts availability for the high volume products that they're able to sell. You're seeing really tight availability on lawn tractors, zero-turn mowers, consumer-oriented equipment, some thinning of the product lines, and maybe some cost increases to the tune of about 8 to 10% or so. So these have been probably one of the most challenging markets for us here at Essex. Months ago, when doing one of these videos, I shared that I was noticing differences between country of origin when it came to availability, right? And that we could get domestically made equipment much easier than imported equipment. And that is still true to a point, but that's starting to wash out a little bit here. We're still hearing companies having trouble with overseas logistics, right? Containers and sea shipping is still a problem. However, that's almost baked into the system now at this point, right? There's a lot more equipment sitting out there on the water, but it's more just a buffer at this point, right? And that machinery is starting to roll in. So I wouldn't say anymore that country of origin has been a real driving factor in what we've seen as far as availability goes. But that doesn't mean that it is totally smoothed out. There's still a lot of problems out there. It just is addressed more on a model by model basis or a series by series basis rather than that broad brush factor of overseas shipping. I'm starting to see some lines of tractors at other dealerships now where things are starting to look a little bit more normal, right? When you drive past in the car, you're finding some cases where somebody's able to have 15 and 20 tractors lined up outside, and it looks like they're available and ready to go. But what you may not realize is that many of those tractors still at this point are usually sold. We still do have a waiting period now in order to get all of your equipment together before it can be sent to the shop and prep to get it out the door. What those tractors are sitting there waiting for, despite sitting there on their four wheels, is usually implements. Tractors like this L3301 right here, we don't have loaders for, right? There's still a global supply issue when it comes to hydraulic cylinders. Any implement that's using hydraulic cylinders, think loaders and backhoes specifically, are in extremely short supply, even when the supply of the base tractor has improved. So we're definitely starting to see a lot of cases now where our inventory on tractors is fairly good. We have most models at this point, but we're struggling still to get retail sales done because we can't source all the implements that are needed to go onto those tractors, and that's adding weeks and sometimes months to availability timelines. One of the biggest success stories that we can say about availability through the pandemic has been New Holland and their hay equipment. The factory for this equipment is only about 40 minutes away here from our store. I've been through it several times. I've done YouTube videos going through the factory showing how this equipment is made. One thing about this hay equipment is that it's made here domestically. It does not come out of Europe like a lot of other brands do. And the parts for these pieces are often built in the factory. They are actually manufacturing the parts there on site. And in many of the cases where they're not, they're using local foundries to us here in order to build a lot of the pieces. So that very localized supply chain for all the bits and bobs that go into making something like a disc vine have been readily available, and the availability of this has been a lot better than a lot of the other equipment that we might see. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not been a problem or two. Things like tires have been an issue here and there, but we definitely have seen a lot better availability from New Holland because of that local supply chain to us here than we have from a lot of other companies. I mentioned earlier that we can't go through any of our industries and just generalize on, good or bad availability. One place we have seen more equipment is in excavators. These are all sold. They're all going out to customers. We're still lacking on the ground inventory, but lead times have shortened significantly, and we do see a lot better availability. And that's despite issues with hydraulic cylinders, right? I can't get hydraulic cylinders to build loaders, but we've got hydraulic cylinders for excavators, right? Can't explain it. Don't know why it happens, but I know we've been getting a lot more on the ground here lately, and we're starting to see better availability. And if we went through and we tried to say, okay, well, that's construction equipment's improving, that's not quite the case, because if you go into things like track loaders and skid steers, availability on those continues to be a real challenge. We're hearing problems from every company on their ability to get wheel motors in order to drive the tires on those machines. And so that seems to be causing an industry-wide supply issues with skid steers and track loaders. Hopeful that we're going to see more inventory here in the third quarter. A lot of the people that I talk to on that equipment are more optimistic right now than what I've heard them be in a very long time. So I'm hoping we're going to be filling a lot of those back orders very quickly, but we still have a significant backlog of customers waiting for skid steers and track machines. In the last several weeks, I've seen a lot of weird stuff happening when it comes to the normal seasonality that we usually see for equipment. We're here in the Northeast, we get a lot of snowfall, and usually most of our snow equipment comes in about the October, November time frame or so, right before we get into snow season. And a lot of the companies are usually building a lot of that snow equipment now and then delivering it in the late fall. But strangely enough, we've gotten a load of walk-behind snowblowers this week. And there's about another dozen or so three-point hitch ones sitting here behind me that just rolled in. These are orders that we would have placed for the last snow season that never showed up. Here we are in the middle of summer and they're rolling in months late. Encouraging to see some of this stuff getting out here, hopefully ahead of the season that we're going to need it for, but definitely outside of the norm that we usually expect. Oftentimes we would be telling people, hey, we're not gonna have your snowblower until fall when you're buying your tractor in the springtime, and for some reason, here they are. On the pricing front, you may have heard about the cost of steel. Now, steel prices had risen probably about 18 to 24 months ago very dramatically. You would see cases where things like a 4x8 sheet of steel that used to be $150 selling for over $600. So a factor of 400 to 500% price increase in the cost of that raw material, and that drove up the price of a lot of things like rotary cutters, right? You could see, my goodness, a solid 2 sheets of steel probably, and that rotary cutter there alone. Now that had driven prices up some months ago, right? And we would get what's called a steel surcharge from many of our vendors, adding cost onto their implements that kind of floated with the price of steel. That has leveled out now. The price of steel has come down a little bit. We have not seen further price increases. We haven't seen them given back though to us either. They're not getting cheaper at this point, but we have seen the price of implements stop increasing because of that steel cost. The buying process for specialty ag equipment, the bigger machinery that we sell, right? Think combines, sprayers, this new Holland air drill here. The buying process is a lot different than, say, a skid steer, right? Where you walk in and we're gonna have the one that you're looking for usually sitting here. These are often going to be ordered and slotted for factory production for delivery to you. That's become a challenge this year. We still have extremely healthy sales for a lot of the big ag machinery that we sell, but the production capacity of a lot of these factories is still fairly limited, and even in normal times can be limited, right? You take a big specialty factory, they're gonna want the thing operating near its peak capacity in order to be efficient in what it's doing. They don't have a whole lot of capacity to surge to meet a greater demand, and that capacity can be questioned sometimes, and their availability to be able to get parts and keep those factories running efficiently. And so we're seeing cases where things like availability for big ag are now pushing out even into 2024. A lot of the 2023 factory capacity is already booked up, or we're seeing book up very, very quickly. So if you're shopping for a piece of big ag equipment, get in, talk to a salesperson now, get a spot in that line, because the opportunities to get equipment for next year are already starting to close. If you paid attention to finance rates at all and listened to what's going on in the news, you're going to know that rates have been rising across all different industries. Whether it's mortgages or car loans or whatever, you're seeing all of those rates increase a little bit, and we've been no exception to that. Whether it's consumer equipment or bigger ag equipment, all those rates have ratcheted up a little bit. Now, they've not gone up in huge ways. Say 0.60 has been a staple of ours for a long time, and we're selling skid steers or tractors, a lot of compact equipment. It's a staple rate that we have had nearly as long as I've been selling equipment. And for the first time now, we've seen a lot of those 0.60 rates step back to 0.48 or 0.99 for 60. About a 12-month or 1% change is about what most of our companies did. So that does not have a massive impact on your bottom line, but it is significant for the industry to see such a staple that we've used to sell equipment for such a long time actually change. So if I try to wrap all this up a little bit, this is a challenging time to be in business. It's a challenging time to be shopping for things, right? I had to get a car for my wife the other day and it was a disaster. But I think at the end of the day, if I look at all of these things that we're dealing with, the problems aren't going away. They're always changing. But in a way, I feel like we're all getting used to this in some kind of weird, twisted way. Our staff are getting used to navigating the availability questions that you have and be able to give you some kind of best guess of what a timeline might look like, short or long, right? We see them both anymore. The price increase stuff is moderated a little bit. I'm sure we're gonna see more eventually. With inflation, it's likely not to go away. But there's a little bit of stability now. I'm not getting the near daily emails from a different company throwing another surcharge or price increase because of something. So in a lot of ways, I feel like we're starting to get a little bit comfortable with the way business is being done now, both for us and for you, right? A lot of customers coming into the store, you know, they see what's going on out in the world around them right now, and they're not surprised when they come into the store and, you know, something might be a little bit more expensive than it was when they priced it 2 years ago, or a lead time might be a little bit longer than what they want. It's not something we like, not the kind of business that we want to be able to provide and run, but there's a comfort level now with where things have gotten, and let's all sit here and cross our fingers and hope that they don't stay this way. It would be great to be able to get back to some kind of normalcy, but inventories remain tight and pricing remains dynamic. The best thing that you could do is come into the store and get with a salesperson and have them talk you through what's happening with the particular piece of equipment that you're shopping for, because as I've shown out here today, say any kind of expectation that you might have in the back of your head may or may not be correct. It's just wildly inconsistent from one product to the next. And so you need that knowledgeable person in order to be able to walk you through a potential purchasing process. If you're shopping for a piece of equipment and we can help, or if you have parts and service needs for a piece of equipment you've already got, give us a call at Messick's. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at messick's.com.